playing through all the matches. So now instead, we're going to just get to like go to the media player, hit play, let it do its thing, and hopefully it's going to be a much smoother experience. We'll kind of see how it goes. I don't have any guarantees. This is the first time I've tried this out, but Swag Tusk suggested it on YouTube, so giving it a shot. Anyway, you might hear clicking of the keyboard occasionally as I pause and unpause. We'll just have to deal with that. Just this bottom portion. Maybe I find something to cover a lot of this at the bottom up, but until then, we're kind of stuck with it. So, opening hand, reasonable opening hand. We've got like some cheap interaction. We've got a Kroxa as a threat, Bobble to help get us more draws. If we kill something, then maybe Drown in the Locks online. So, just Blood Crypt and Bobble, pass the turn. Bobble on their upkeep. Since we have Unholy Heat, and there's nothing else I can cast on their turn, there's really not a reason to bobble on my turn. Like the best thing I could draw into, I already have in my hand. And if I draw into something good, like let's say I don't know, a Ledger Shredder or something, then I don't want my opponent to be able to just like Thoughtseize that away if they're on a Thoughtseize deck. Speak of the Devil. So Inquisition takes Drown, kind of like the odd man out card in our hand. And again, that's why we bobble on their upkeep instead of our turn, because we protect that draw. Did happen to just be a Scalding Tarn, but still. So let's get our Kroxa value here. And since we're adding creature to the yard and we've got the Scalding Tarn, we do have the ability to get Delirium on Unholy Heat next turn. We see... Yeah, so we saw Urza's Saga on the top of their library. But they're just going to cast a Tarmogoyf, which is really unfortunate because we need to fetch to get Delirium. But fetching also puts land in the yard, so Goyf would grow to a 6/7. Kind of crazy that this turn 2 Goyf is a 5/6 with artifact, creature, planeswalker, sorcery, and instant already in the yard. And a fetch land in our hand. So we've got Saga, we've got Rin. We're going to take this hit off Goyf, mainly so we can just kill the Rin. Happen to draw into a Drown, so now we've got the ability to kill the Goyf, since the Unholy Heat doesn't. I'm just going to pass a turn. If I have to take a hit off this Goyf to be able to like stop the momentum with Drown, that's good. But it's more than likely that my opponent's just going to make a construct on my turn. So it's probably going to end up being like Drown the Goyf, maybe get back Kroxa on my turn, hold up Heat. So if that's the case, I want to save a bit of life. If they do have like another Tarmogoyf, then I can go to my turn, heat the Goyf, and then escape the Kroxa, exile the cards to shrink the Goyf, and kill it due to state-based actions. So if they did have a follow-up Goyf, it wouldn't be the end of the world. So Spell Pierce, I have seen a Fatal Push on top of their library with that second Bobble. So I know that they have a Fatal Push in hand and then an Unknown. This is probably a little mistake on my part here. So I escaped Kroxa. That part's not a mistake. They discard Fatal Push. So I should be kind of clued in on, oh, they probably have another removal spell for Kroxa if they're discarding Fatal Push. Because it's really tough to say, like, hey, I've got a an answer to the Kroxa, I'm just going to throw it away when I could throw away basically anything else. Like, I don't think there's a reason to keep a Renin 6 or a Tarmogoyf or something over the Fatal Push. Maybe not even like another Saga. So I should have been, I think, a little more cognizant of that. And here's why. So opponent makes a construct, untaps, Saga trigger goes on the stack. They make a second construct. And I'm thinking, okay, if they fetch, then this first construct outgrows Unholy Heat. And maybe they're able to like get something that I can't attack in with Kroxa. So I end up firing off this Unholy Heat. But if I had thought like they have to be keeping another answer to Kroxa, then it would have been much better for me to just hold on to the Spell Pierce. Or not hold on to the Spell Pierce, not tap off of the Spell Pierce, so that I'd be able to counter whatever they had to answer Kroxa and keep that around. But like I said, I fired off that Unholy Heat, and they go get a Nihil Spell Bomb, so there goes Kroxa. But iteration off the top, we always complain about it, but it's really good on our side. Get to find another Kroxa for when they exile this one. I could get Drown in the Lock and kill the Construct token. I think Ledger Shredder's a little bit better. Because like I don't really care about a 2/2 token, but I kind of want to have a board presence. So opponent's going to untap, find themselves a Tireless Tracker. Pretty good. Tireless Tracker plus a Saga, even better. So now they have Construct big enough to swing in. We crack our Fire Outlet. Opponent goes ahead and fires off the Nihil Spell Bomb. If they didn't, and we had like a priority passing land, like a shock land or a basic, then we'd be able to play that out, immediately get back Kroxa, and they wouldn't have any way of interacting. So good on them to fire that off there. Yeah, good on them firing it off. So that Kroxa's gone. But we do find a Ledger Shredder, which means we can double spell here, get a couple Connive triggers, get Kroxa back in the bin. Find another iteration. So, like, we go from no board presence to reasonable spot. It rends back a Saga. All right. So, rend back a Saga, make another clue, and attack in with both. The way I block, or the way I'm thinking about blocks, is if they have a removal spell for like a Shredder, worst case scenario is I double block the Construct, Ragavan on Tireless Tracker. If they kill a Shredder, I still get like a block on the second Shredder or block on the Construct. And if they sack a clue to save the Tireless Tracker, then the Construct dies to the Ledger Shredder. If I block, say, double Shredder on Tireless Tracker, and they have like a removal spell for a Shredder plus crack a clue, then I'm in really bad shape because they kill both of my Ledger Shredders. But if I offer up the trade of the Ragavan, which the Ragavan's dead with the Renin 6 on board anyway, then it makes a little more sense for me to just like take the block on the tracker, double block the Construct, and go from there. I think they should have Ren pinged the Ragavan before attacking, but oh well, past that point. Like I said, I block Ragavan on Tireless Tracker, double Shredder on the Construct, so that if they want to save the Tireless Tracker, the Construct is going to die to a Shredder, even if they have a removal spell for the second Shredder. if they want to like make a construct and kill one of the ledger shredders with their construct, that's fine, because then the tireless tracker trades with Ragavan. Either way, I get something off the board. And it looks like they're just gonna protect their tireless tracker. Sure. So we get the construct away, find another iteration. Iteration finds terminate, which is perfect. Spell Pierce pretty dead. Don't really need more ledger shredders. Planning on getting back Kroxa next turn if I can, as long as they don't have a second copy of Nihil Spellbomb or like a Soul Guide Lantern or something. And it's just a Shadow Spear, so deal. They do have 3 cards in hand. All right. So I ended up going for this iteration because of the 3 cards. I kind of felt it was more important to find a way to get the construct off the board as opposed to getting back the Kroxa. Like if they have make a construct, untap, make a construct, kill something, strap up Shadow Spear, like I'm in a pretty rough spot. But if I can get one of those threats off the board, then it shrinks all the subsequent threats, because the constructs like depend on each other to grow. Thoughtseize not particularly interesting, but I keep Thoughtseize so I can just like ditch it to this second expressive iteration, which of course just finds me more Thoughtseizes, as one does. And then here I just don't want to go down to 3 life. I don't know if they're actually running Lightning Bolt or not. Like they're probably just on Unholy Heat and Fatal Push, but it's kind of free to not play into Lightning Bolt. So they untap, find a Thoughtseize my Thoughtseize, which is A-okay with me. Strap up this construct with a Shadow Spear and attack in. So we're just going to double block to get that off the board. We do get to kill a Shredder, but we get to untap and get back a Kroxa. And now we've got Kroxa plus the ability to get our basic Swamp, have Drown in the Lock. It does mean I go down to Bolt range, but got to make some sacrifices at some point. So they strap up the Shadow Spear and make this attack. This attack can only mean one thing, and it's that they have a removal spell for whatever blocks the big construct token, the 5/5. Because they're wanting to have me block, they kill my blocker, trample through for lethal. Otherwise, this attack makes no sense, because I just get to block like Shredder on the 4/4, Kroxa on the 5/5, and everything lives. So they're going to go for the Fatal Push on the Kroxa. Now they've got one more card in hand I don't know about. I've got 2 options. If I believe that they have another removal spell, then it makes more sense for me to Drown in the Lock the construct with the Shadow Spear. If I think that they don't have another removal spell, it makes more sense for me to Drown in the Lock and counter the Fatal Push so that I get to keep my Kroxa around. I think with another card in hand plus the research desk, I think the odds are more likely that they're going to have a removal spell. So I'm just going to go to Drown and Lock the construct token, if I can tap correctly. And yep, they did have another removal spell, terminate the Ledger Shredder. But I do get to just keep from dying. I got enough cards in my yard to escape Kroxa again, so that's fine. They're empty-handed. That's good. We get a Ragavan attack in, which finds a Fatal Push. So now we get to kill their construct for free, plus get back Kroxa. We still have Bolt. reasonable spot for us. Crack the research desk. Stuff and spells and things, and crack another research desk. So they looked at their top card with Bauble. It wasn't good. They fetched it away. Cracked research desk. Found a Saga, but they've already played the land drop past the turn, and we've just got Kroxa attack, Ragavan, Bolt for lethal. Let's go to game number 2. Sideboarding against the Saga deck. Board out a bunch of Thought Seizes. Board out like Bolt is pretty bad on the draw, especially because it does kill Ragavan, but doesn't deal with Ren, doesn't deal with Tarmogoyf, doesn't always deal with construct tokens. Ragavan really awkward on the draw because of Ren and 6. Drown in the Lock's not great because they had main deck Nihil Spellbomb. You can kind of assume they might have more graveyard hate post board. Stuff I'm bringing in is like the Dress Downs because it kills Saga tokens. It shrinks Goyf to an 0/1. Stops like Ragavan trigger. Stops Tireless Tracker from triggering for a turn. Bring in Kaitos because they're like difficult to deal with. Really value centric. Bring in the unlicensed hearses, the 2 hearses, because they're able to fight over the graveyard, shrink Tarmogoyf, fight over Ren and 6 targets, and bring in the extra like terminate. You know, killing stuff is pretty good, so I hear. So let's see if we can go through this match or this game a little bit faster. Trying to get used to like the timing of going over these recordings, and it's probably going to be a situation where I'm just going to go faster, let the game play, and kind of talk about the relevant points as they come up. So bobble myself because they didn't have a Thought Seized. Play a turn 1 Ragavan. They could have a Ren and 6, but it means I get to drop down unlicensed hearse on turn 2, eat some stuff, maybe stop the Ren and 6 from like gaining momentum. But since we found the Ragavan, we'll just kill the Ren and 6. Of course, second Ren and 6. Research desk is whatever, but I've got the option here to like attack them with Ragavan, get the clue, play the hearse, and hopefully just kind of like wreck their graveyard some. Stop this Ren and 6 from doing anything, especially now that they have a Tireless Tracker out. So we get to snag that, untap. I'm definitely good with finding more lands, but like kill the Tireless Tracker is a big priority. We can dash Ragavan because we can make a token, play the Shadow out. And if our opponent does do something like kill the Shadow, dash a Ragavan, then we can crew the hearse and block whatever. They're just going to play out an EE, which is fine. Goyf, since I have the hearse, doesn't really matter. But here, so I'm actually EEing on 0 to take out their EE, but the fact that I get to take out 2 clue tokens with it is pretty nice. So now I get to keep my Shadow around because I took out their EE, and I get to stop those 2 clues that they made off the Tireless Tracker. So all in all, pretty good turn for me. Shrink the yard a bunch. Thoughtseize, you got it. Like, I've got a bunch of value pieces in hand. Opponent's going to get their Fatal Push on. Cool. If you want to attack me, cool. But here, we're just going to go ahead and get them empty-handed. Yeah, so they scoop it up there. We could get them empty-handed if they had anything to pitch, but they didn't have anything, so they end up just like being dead to Kroxa triggers. So this is match number 3. Yeah. Match number 3, opening hand. is a little slow. Like, I figure I've got a good removal spell in Terminate. I've got threats in Croaks and Shadow. Bobble maybe can filter and help draw something. Iteration to keep the gas coming. So, like, it's a good hand if I'm not up against, say, a turn 1 Ragavan. But everything else I should have some amount of game against. So Rogren Trio makes you think blue-white control, maybe Watery Grave to help get Leyline Binding online, but then they Tainted Indulgence, throw away a Gristlebrand, so don't think it's blue-white control anymore. So we'll hold up Terminate, see if we get to hit a Gristlebrand, but they've got a Grief pitching a Traxa. So this hand just went from like decent and a reasonable number of matchups to absolutely horrendous against exactly what my opponent's doing. Ephemerating Gristlebrand's and griefing and Goryo's Vengeancing. So we'll see if we happen to draw a removal spell for Gristlebrand, but we only have like 2 copies of Terminate in the deck. We don't have the mana to cast the second one. See if we find a Bolt. We don't, so we're dead game 1. Yeah, so not the kind of matchup I'm really expecting to see. Not something I can like mulligan aggressively for game 1. But we do have a lot of sideboard hate with like the 2 unlicensed hearses. We have Fluster Storms, Spell Pierces, a bunch of good stuff out of the board. So I take out like the heats and the bolts because they don't kill anything that gets reanimated. They can kill a grief, but I'm bringing in Terminates and hearses and stuff. I have Thought Seizes. I'd rather rely on that stuff. Drown in the Lock, I wanted to keep in, but if my opponent just had like turn 1, nothing, turn 2, Tainted Indulgence, ditch a Gristlebrand, then I was kind of worried that like Drown would just be a really slow answer. And so if they had like Grief plus black card and I'm stuck with like a 2 mana counter and 2 lands or something, then it gets really clunky. I just kind of figured I'm bringing in more efficient counter spells. So kind of want to lean into that. Which I'm pretty sure I end up like reverting back game 3 and bringing back in the Drowns. But why are we staring at the sideboard so long? All right. So we've got a Drown. Like I said, it's a little bit slow and clunky here, but with like Bobble helping to mitigate some of the draws. Get down Shredder and Bobble because our opponent can't discard and reanimate the Gristlebrand right here. It's not a 1 mana instant speed looting spell. Get Roger Triome and Dotha, so they do get Leyline Binding. But we get to find a Shadow off iteration, or find another Drown off iteration. And so I play out the Shadow there, mainly to help fuel this Kroxa in my yard. Because now I'm up to 5 cards. I can escape the Kroxa if I get to that point. And also because I don't think that Shadow's going to do a ton to help me here. Like, if I find a fetch land, I get to play out a Shadow, that's great. But I don't think having more copies of Shadow in my hand is going to do anything. And I don't think drawing another one right away is going to do anything. So I'd rather just, like, not have it as a potential draw. If the best thing I can find is a fetch land. Speak of the devil. All right, so Iteration finds a Thoughtseize. Really, really good here because we get all of the known information. Take a look at their hand. We see Leyline of Sanctity, Leyline Binding, Prismatic Ending, Goryo's Vengeance. So I know that I want to get them to like fire off spells here. Leyline of Sanctity doesn't matter. I don't care about that card in the slightest now. Prismatic Ending and Leyline Binding can both answer Kroxa. So more than likely I want to use like this Thoughtseize to deal with one of them, have them use the other on the Shadow, and then escape Kroxa, hold up Drown in the Lock, and maybe that should be able to take care of just everything else. So we take the Goryo's Vengeance. Shadow is going to get hit with the Leyline Binding. So now I can escape Kroxa, Drown in the Lock, the Prismatic Ending. But they just hard cast out Leyline of Sanctity, so that's great. Now I get to escape Kroxa. I don't have to worry about Leyline. Pass the turn. Top deck a Shadow Prophecy. You got it. Prophecy itself isn't doing anything. Final land in Agorio's Vengeance. Cool. We got Drown, and they scoop it up from there. I thought that was maybe a little bit of a premature scoop because I think you get one more draw step to just like maybe find another Goryo's Vengeance. But maybe they decided that another Goryo's wasn't it. Like I said, game 3, I bring the Drowns back in because it seems they're a little more graveyard reliant than I thought. So main phase, Rogren Triome. Well, we get to Thoughtseize, clear the way. Let's rewind for that Thoughtseize real quick. This is the power of doing this on Moto instead of, or not on Moto, doing this on Windows Media Player, whatever. Okay. So, Faithful Mending, Gristlebrand, Solitude, Tainted Indulgence. Not like too scary of a situation, mainly because I've got this hearse. So I'm going to be able to answer the Gristlebrand before they can get Agorio's Vengeance online. I've also got Flusterstorm as like a backup plan. So I kind of want to just take some value piece. My idea is target the Faithful Mending so that they have to cast the Tainted Indulgence if they want to get the Gristlebrand in the yard. And with the hearse, I get to snag both the Gristlebrand and the Mending that they put in the yard. So they can't flash that back. So why did I take the Indulgence? Oh, I guess it's because it doesn't really matter. Like, it's the 2 life is the only difference. And I don't think the life gain is that relevant. But either way, they're going to put one of them in the yard. Or is Faithful Mending a... No, it's an instant. So yeah, I should have taken the Faithful Mending. But I think realistically, it doesn't like matter that much. Especially if your opponent's going to main phase the Faithful Mending. Now we look like a genius. Like, oh, they sorcery speeded the Faithful Mending. Which they probably did just to play around counter magic. But we cast the hearse and they scoop it up. So apparently not very many answers to hearse. All right, so this is round number 3. 3, I think. Pretty positive. I've played this opponent pretty recently ago, but I couldn't remember what they were on. So we're just going to roll with it. Turn 1 Ragavan, pretty proactive. Spire Bluff Canal and Holy Heat. So 58% chance it's mURktide. Realistically, like 95% chance, but the odds sound good when you say 58. So we'll just go ahead and Kroxa, get that in the yard, get a card out of hand. If they dash a Ragavan, that's not the worst thing in the world. We get to play Ragavan. They've got Heed, so we're just going to trade back and forth with some resources. But because I've got Kroxa in the bin, that gives me like some amount of inevitability as long as I can like find some lands and kind of keep the 1-for-1 battle going. We've got answers to like Blood Moon. We've got answers to any big threat that comes along. My thought at the moment is just that my opponent probably has like a mURktide plus a counter spell, and they're trying to get up to that mana. But, I mean, if they're not casting it yet, That's fine with me. Do find another land. So one step closer to Kroxa. We just want to start like using these spells. We're kind of at, I don't want to say desperation spell mode, but just about anything that my opponent puts on the stack, I'm going to try to fight over. Some stuff, not so much, but the majority of things. All right, so now we've got Kroxa mana. So we'll play out Shadow. This is just like something my opponent's got to deal with. And all I'm interested in right now is getting spells out of their hand like Counterspell. So that when I cast Kroxa, it's going to stick around. All right, so they're down to one card in hand. Reasonable chance it's like another Counterspell. Which is A-okay. Now they're empty-handed. I've got like all these good spells in hand. Drown in the Lock can even hit a mURktide Regent. Fetch land is perfect because now I get to kill the Ledger Shredder and get back Kroxa again. And I think my opponent's going to be pretty hard pressed to come back from this at this point. Terminate in the main, looking really good. Sideboarding against mURktide, taking out a bunch of Thought Seizes, take out Drowns. I'm usually like, take out more Ragavans on the draw and maybe leave in like or bring in a Dress Down, which I think is what I did here. And then board out most of the Drowns on the draw. Boarding out like all the Drowns on the play because I'm usually more interested in like Unlicensed Hearse on turn 2 on the play. And then Kaito, still between 1 and 2, bringing in. I kind of like 1 on the draw and 2 on the play. It's a really good card, but if you're like behind, it's not really a catch-up card. So you do have to be careful of that. All right, let's get to the action right about. I ended up like pulling up this sideboard screen to obviously talk about sideboarding, but I wasn't really sure how long it would take, so I just kind of left it up there. Now I know for the next one, hey, just bring it up here for half a second, then you can send it away. Which we'll get used to the timing as we go. So this opening hand that I had, like Kroxa, Dress Down, Shadow, Bobble, something like that. Let's take a look at the full opening hand. Kroxa, Dress Down, Shadow, Hearse, 3 lands. I find these hands all the time for whatever reason. It's the kind of hand that is A+ if your opponent doesn't have turn 1 Ragavan. If your opponent doesn't have turn 1 Ragavan. Like, turn 1 Dragon's Rage Channeler, this hand is phenomenal. Turn 1, pass the turn with Spell Pierce or Snare, whatever, hand's great. Turn 1 Ragavan, hand's horrible. So you kind of have to play the odds. There's like a 42% chance or something like that your opponent's going to have any given 4 of in their deck, in their opening hand. So it's like it's a better than 50-50 shot that this hand is reasonable. But again, they get ahead, go for the Blood Moon. We Dress Down just to try to find an extra draw towards a basic. But pretty locked out from Blood Moon. Definitely the power of Ragavan on display. They get to fix their mana with Blood Moon. We're going to just add Gigantha, exile some stuff. If they're preemptively EEing on 2 just to get rid of Hearst, then I kind of have to assume they've got like a mURktide in hand. They find a petty theft. I assume they found that on their draw, because I think if you found it earlier, then you would have petty theft on your upkeep to get the surveil trigger before you draw. But we're just going to replay the Giganta, and they find a lightning bolt, so we're dead in the air. Little blood moon unfortunateness. Either way, on to game 3. This is just showing like I took out the dress down that I brought in and took out the 4th drown in the lock. Brought in, I think like EE or something. So opponent plays a 1-drop. Perfect. So now we get to kill this, untap, drop Hearst down. So a little more like tempo positivity. We've also got our basic island, so we can play like Ledger Shredder and Spell Pierce through a Blood Moon. Now we've got all of our basics. Decided to just add Giganta so that we're able to play through a Blood Moon if that happens. And there's nothing I really want to hold up because there's no guarantee my opponent's going to do anything. So we'll just take the turn to get that out of the way. They've got Iteration. Play some stuff. Sure. Like, don't care about EE on 1 while I've got this Hearst sitting out. We're just going to eat stuff away. Shredder plus Bobble's always fun. Ditch of Croaks is always fun. Gonna go ahead and eat stuff now because I don't want my opponent to just untap and get to play out a mURktide. Even if it's just a 3/3 mURktide, like it's kind of free to play around. Just make them go ahead and pop this EE, tack in, hold up Unholy Heat so I can kill a mURktide here. I know people are going to say, like, oh, Basic Island and Croxa, really, really bad. I don't think this is a spot where I want a Croxa anyway. I don't think Croxa's really accomplishing much. Especially when I want this Unholy Heat to kill a mURktide. Shredder finds a heat. Would like to keep the Shredder around. Can't play out Death Shadow, so doesn't make a lot of sense to keep it in hand. All right, so Iteration means we should get a Shredder trigger here. Yep. Could keep the other land to get back Croxa, but I think keeping the Unholy Heats is a little bit better, and then keeping the Kaito. So if I'm able to get some stuff off the board, I can kind of readjust from there. Attack in, because if they block, I'll trade off this Unholy Heat and Shredder for the mURktide. If they don't block, then we just get Kaito down. And now we're in a spot where it's like, all right, we're dead to double bolt. But if they don't have double bolt, we're in a really good position. Throw away the Shadow because the Shadow doesn't block. So, like, playing out Shadow here doesn't mean anything. I really thought for a second I was about to get slow rolled by double bolt. But they ended up bolting me to trigger or help connive with the Ledger Shredder and then go for this Consider. I guess just like trying to find the second bolt. We get a connive trigger so we can just ditch some dead spell like Mishra's Bauble. And now hopefully Kaito can kind of help us take over. Like, if you don't find a way to start dealing with this stuff pretty aggressively, then we've got our Planeswalker drawing cards every turn. So they find Channeler into EE on 2. pretty good because they do get to wipe away our shredders. I decide to ditch an iteration so I can keep the second shredder. And I figure part of my reason for ditching iteration there is I figure if I'm playing out the shredder plus like terminate this turn because I got to get the threat off the board, then I'm probably not iterationing until next turn, if at all. And I probably want to just like be getting back Croxa at that point. So how many turns am I going to pass like holding up or holding on to this iteration instead of just taking the opportunity to make this another live spell? It's like, what good does having a whole bunch of iterations do me if I'm not casting them? Blood Moon is fine. Okay. So now we get to show off the super secret mode of Kaito, which is, hey, let's make a dude. This dude can stand in front of Ragavan really, really well. And as long as our opponent doesn't draw a lightning bolt, we've got them dead next turn. Lightning bolt or counter spell. So dash Ragavan. Pick up Kaito, find an expressive iteration. I know that they're dead to this lightning bolt, but I want to go through the motions of casting like the iteration and stuff in case maybe I find like a drown in the lock and I can lightning bolt plus protection. Or in this case, find a flusterstorm. It's not perfect, but it's something. But more, I'm just looking for some way of protecting that lightning bolt. I know the odds are low that they found like a counter spell right there, but it's pretty free to just play around. All right, so match number 4, lead off Gigantha. Yeah, Gigantha Soulscar Mage, so definitely Prowess. Unholy Heat on my turn, because if they cast Mutagenic Growth, like, gets that out of hand. But Sprite Dragon Double Bobble is pretty scary. So we're going to go into a little bit of, like, life preservation mode. Just throw down a chump blocker. Hope my opponent, like, fires off a lightning bolt or something to kill my Ledger Shredder, and I just get to soak up some damage here that would be going at my face. But since they were just going to attacks, I was just going to take it. And they go for the upkeep lightning bolt. So good on them for seeing that line. But we do find terminate, which is obviously fantastic here. We're down some basics, but hopefully we can just find like something relevant here. I thought about main phasing the Unholy Heat, but I was kind of afraid of my opponent having any one spell and I didn't have Delirium. And then I passed the turn. They went for the Lightning Bolt or attack and then Lightning Bolt on the Shredder. I go for the Unholy Heat, mainly because for whatever reason, I was thinking, okay, I honestly couldn't tell you what I was thinking. It was some combination of, oh, I've totally got Delirium, and oh, the Shredder's going to die and give me Delirium, and just don't play Magic at 1 a.m. It's a terrible, terrible thing to do. You'll kind of forget why you're doing anything. I get bailed out big time by my opponent casting that Lava Dart. So now I get to connive away the expressive iteration. I get Delirium, kill the Swift Spear, and keep my Shredder alive until they flash back the Dart. But yeah, just all around bad, 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 bad. and got super, super bailed out. So find a drown. I do not want to go down to 3 life. I think that's really bad spot to be against the Bolt deck. And now that I've found this extra drown, I'm just going to sit on these for a while. My opponent plays 5th land and doesn't play Giganta. So I'm assuming that they realize like Drown in the Loch is a potential card. I don't want to put myself in a position where I have to fetch and shock to drown or to double drown. So I go ahead and fetch. I go down to 3. I'm not dead to Lava Dart or most creatures. But I can kind of play around a Lightning Bolt here by just not tapping off of the second drown. I mean, I'm not dead to like 1 creature hasting in, and if they have like creature plus spell, I can counter the spell, just take like 2 off the prowess. But we've got to get the game over with. I have to attack at some point. The opponent's like not even attacking with the Soul Scar, so really, I don't know what they have at this point. It could just be double land, but that seems pretty unlikely. Like, why they didn't block and cast the Manamorphose, I don't know. We'll fire off a drown on an iteration. That's like a good enough value target. So play out Shadow, Manamorphose. Kind of feels like my opponent might have been like sandbagging some spells, waiting for this. And I'll take 1. Like, 1 doesn't kill me, so awesome. I don't know if they just like weren't thinking about having to block on the crackback or what, or the fact that I could like just attack with Shadow and hold back the Ledger Shredder. Board out Thoughtseizes because Owl. Board out some Ragavans because of Lava Dart. A Croxa because like Vapor Snag and stuff like that to make Croxa really awkward. And then board in. I think Flusterstorm's a little bit better than Spell Pierce. They're both fine, but I didn't have enough room for a whole bunch of 1 mana counters. Flusterstorm, the only thing it really misses is Underworld Breach, but by the time they get Underworld Breach mana, like Spell Pierce and Underworld Breach usually just means like, hey, you still get 7 baubles back. Opening hand, triple bauble and a fetch land. I'm like, okay, I'll find a second land for sure. Get Steam Vents so that I can cast like Ledger Shredder if I find any second land, which of course we do not. Still no land. If I had thought that there was a reasonable chance I would not see the second land for so long, then I would have just gotten a Black Source to play out Shadow. But I was kind of in that mindset of like, oh, there's no way I go through triple bauble plus the potential for 1 or 2 scries and don't see a second land. And then the universe mocks me and gives me the Steam Vents with like Shadow, Drown in the Loch in hand. So be it. So be it. Sideboarding against Prowess. So this is going into game 3. I think the only changes I made were I cut like an extra, or no, brought in Something to do with a Ragavan somewhere. Can't remember. Not important. Reasonable hand. We've got removal and terminate and EE. We've got Kroxa. We've got Shadow, our best threat. I'm kind of thinking here that I might just like EOT dress down, untap, play Kroxa, and just hope that they don't have a good way of dealing with that. Especially when they go turn 2 iteration with just like nothing to do after it. Hey, let's just put a Kroxa on board and see what happens. We've got a Lightning Bolt to kill a Dragon's Rage Channeler if it does get Delirious and we feel we need to kill it. But if they're just going to like main phase, fire off iterations, cool. I'll take the opportunity to kill the Channeler because I don't think there's a 1 mana thing they can follow up that with that I care about. Like, even if they Vapor Snag the Kroxa or something, I still just get to untap and play the Shadow, so yeah. Or like untap, play Shredder Kroxa. But here we'll just sit on EE for any 1 mana threats and terminate for anything bigger than that. And if they want to Underworld Breach and get back 2 baubles, that's fine. So there's an important sequence here. As soon as my opponent goes to combat, I'll point it out. So they attack him with Sprite Dragon. I have the option to fire off the Terminate right now. I think it's very important to like point out not to do that. Especially since they're like tapped out here. Because there's always the chance that my opponent does something like crack the bauble, mutagenic growth the Sprite Dragon. It's up to a 7/7. Mutagenic it again. It's up to a 10/10. And then they've got the ability to exile 3 cards and like mutagenic a 3rd time to try to make it lethal right here. And if they do that and then I terminate, then I just get to untap and kill them with Kroxa. So I think it's important to give myself that out of waiting. So I go to my block step. They have priority. If they want to do something, they've got to fire it off right there. They don't do anything. They pass priority, still in the block step. Now I get to terminate because like damage isn't being dealt until the damage step. So take advantage of the fact that you have this like blocker step to give your opponent the opportunity to mess up and make extra game actions that weren't necessary. And now that I found Drown in the Lock, I think the game's pretty much over. We just like play out Shadow. Why not? And then they scoop it up. And I think they revealed something like, I made a comment there about, oh, my opponent could have Swift Spear, Sprite Dragon, or like Sprite Dragon, Bolt, Lava Dart, Mutagenic, or something like that, and I could be dead if I didn't have the Drown in the Lock, obviously. And they revealed their hand after the match, and it was like Sprite Dragon, Bolt, Lava Dart, Swift Spear, chained to the rocks. And I was like, holy crap, I was close to being dead there. Clearly they didn't have white for chained to the rocks, and I had the EE, but like seeing Sprite Dragon, Dart, Bolt, and thinking like, okay, well that's Sprite Dragon for 1, Lava Dart, Flashback Lava Dart, Bolt, 3 damage off Bolt, 2 damage off the Lava Darts is 9. If you got the Swift Spear, if you got another Bolt, Mutagenic, something like that, then it's just lethal, like out of nowhere. So that was kind of cool to see that hand and think like, oh man, I really did just dodge a bullet there. But regardless, get to go on to match number 5. Good opening hand. Turn 1 interaction. Turn 2 Shredder plus Bobble to connive. Iteration after that. Opponent suspends Rhinos on 1. So reasonable opening hand against Rhinos. Like we've got Shredder plus Bobble. Shredder triggers on not only my Bobble as a second spell, also triggers if they put a Cascade spell on the stack. Or triggers on the Crashing Footfalls off of the Cascade spell. Ditch the Bolt because it never kills a Rhino. Keep around the Mishra's Bobble for extra connive triggers, but they have Fury there, so that goes that throws that out the window. We did see him ditch Fable of the Mirror Breaker off Fury. Usually not a card that I see a lot out of the Rhinos decks. So I'm kind of wondering. I ran into a Rhinos opponent recently that was running Fable of the Mirror Breaker and Indomitable Creativity in Rhinos. So I was kind of thinking it might be that deck again. Want to get spells in the yard for Kroxa, so let's just go ahead and fire off that. I still have the double Unholy Heat for 2 Rhinos coming off suspend in a couple turns. Double Kroxa to get a bunch of these cards out of hand. So what I'm hoping is next turn I can just like escape Kroxa, Unholy Heat something. Opponent is now empty-handed. I still want to get Kroxa out. I decided not to shock in here because I don't think there's anything that happens or that can happen that would make me want to fire off the Unholy Heat on their instep. And I kind of want to be a little conservative with my life total. So now I get to play Shredder, attack. If they like double block with Rhinos, I can Unholy Heat a Rhino. Basically, any amount of things that they're willing to put in front of this Kroxa is a win for me. Now we get to just kill off the Kiki Jiki, say go. Hopefully fight over something on their turn and get to just like untap and escape Kroxa again. Connive. Counter some Rhinos. And opponent plays out their land as the last card. So cool. We get to escape with Kroxa again. Didn't matter if I heated first or Kroxa first if I was killing the Rhino. Or killing the Kiki Jiki. If I was killing the Rhino, then I might want to heat first just to make sure I don't like accidentally click off Delirium. But I think I had plenty of cards in the yard. Didn't matter. All right, so let's talk about combat here real quick. Opponent drew and passed, so they could have like a tap spell, bounce spell, whatever. We want to attack with both because, one, I want to get their card out of hand. If it is something relevant, then they have to cast it and take 3 off the Kroxa. If they take 3 off the Kroxa, it means that they're dead to the second Kroxa escaping. Or if they like take 3 off the Kroxa trigger, or don't take 3 off the Kroxa trigger, if they just take the Ledger Shredder attack, then they're dead to the second Kroxa coming back. So I should be able to win through like any combination of spells. Or not. I should be able to win through basically anything as soon as I'm able to go to combat. Um, but they end up having a dead and gone to bounce the Ledger Shredder back. So they take 3 off the Kroxa and then double block the Kroxa for whatever reason and scoop because I guess they realize we can escape it. Sideboarding against Rhinos. On the draw, I'm boarding out more Ragavans because between like Fire and Ice and Dead and Gone, Fury, Brazen Borrower, they have a lot of ways of keeping Ragavan from hitting them on turn 2. On the play, I'm more likely to have more of them in because it takes out like Brazen Borrower and Fire and Ice's potential answers. Boarding out Bolts because they don't kill Rhinos ever. Board out a Terminate because it does kill a Rhino, but it's very, very inefficient at doing so. Board out a Kroxa because of all like the bounce effects and stuff. That Kroxa's not always going to stick around. And then there's a chance that they've got Endurance as well. So I just don't want to see like that many Kroxas. Boarding in all the Spell Pierces, Fluster Storms, Engineered Explosives. It's like 2 Pierce over 2 Bolt, 2 Fluster Storm over 2 Ragavans, 2 EE over Terminate and a Kroxa. All right. Get better about this sideboard timing for sure. Feel our Pokemon. Opening hand. We've got EE. We've got Bobble. Bunch of shadows. Have a hard time throwing it back. Like, obviously, I need to find more lands for shadows, not more shadows for lands. So, one step at a time. Another Footfall suspended. Okay. Pretty good. Be a little conservative with our life total. Woo, found a second land. Means we can just go ahead and like fire off Kroxa. And I'm expecting like a third copy of Rhinos here, just a main phase Cascade spell. But then they don't. So if they don't have a Rhinos on their main phase, then I'm expecting them to not have a copy on my turn. Because, like, if you're not casting Rhinos when I'm tapped out, like, what are you doing? Fire off EE to eat that Force Negation. Like, between EE and Drown in the Lock, one's going to answer the Rhinos. So I don't really need to have both of them. Now, maybe it was a sequencing thing. Maybe it would have been smarter for me to pass the turn, let them cast the Rhinos. I go for Drown in the Lock. They force a negation, untap on my turn, play out EE, pass the turn. They resolve the second set of Rhinos, and I just wipe them all. Looks good if they don't have an answer to the EE after it resolves. Clearly, they had Brazen Borrower, so that plan would have resulted in me taking 8 damage anyway. Or I guess not taking. It would have left 4 Rhinos or 2 Rhinos on the board anyway. But that's kind of okay. Find another counter spell, sure. I just want to get down shadows, so counter away. Third land would be really, really nice. Hardcast of Fury is fine. So I had a few options here. Option number 1 was play a shadow and then like Unholy Heat the Fury or Unholy Heat a Rhino. And have just like Shadow out as a blocker for 1, take the hit off 1. The concern there was if my opponent has a way to like deal with that 1 shadow, I'm just dead. If I play out double shadow and my opponent has a way of dealing with 1 shadow, I'm dead. But if my opponent's got an answer to a shadow and I'm dead to an answer to a shadow, regardless of what I do, then the best situation I can put myself in is to play multiple shadows so that if they don't have an answer to a shadow, I'm in a better position after that. So that's what I decided to go with. They play land, attacking with Fury. We're not going down to 2 because I'm not putting myself dead to like a fire and ice. Even though if they had an ice, they could have just tapped down a shadow and kill me. But they could always like draw one next turn. So play EE. Opponent's got another mystical dispute. So at least now I know they're empty-handed. And I can attack because if they double block, I Unholy Heat a Rhino, get one off the board, kill the other in combat. Opponent is too smart for us. So let's play out Double Shadow. They've got Brazen Borrower. I'm dead if they have like ice into ice or something. Shit. Or ice into ice or ice into Violent Outburst. Or yeah, I think that was it. Ice into ice or ice into Outburst. But they didn't. They had ice, whiffed on the second draw. Thoughtseize revealed a fetch land, so we know we're free and clear. So we get to Unholy Heat one of these tokens, and that will allow us the attack in for lethal with our extra shadows. So that's it. That's a nice little 5 matches. We ended this video in an hour and 6 minutes, which is a lot better than the clicking through, which was averaging like an hour and a half or so. So hopefully as we get used to this, it'll get a little bit better. And especially once we start getting the actual video editing in, we'll be able to clear out a bunch of the free time in these videos. Any changes I'm going to make to the list? I don't think there's a ton that I'm interested in swapping around right now. Maybe if you're more concerned about like Rhinos and Sagas and Hammer Time, you could look at like swapping out Lightning Bolts for Fatal Pushes or swapping the Spell Pierce for a Fatal Push, especially if you're like me and not running Underworld Breach at the moment. In the sideboard, I seem to run into Living End a lot. So Flusterstorm and Spell Pierce have a little extra weight to me. But if you're not seeing those decks, you could trim down on those numbers. Dress Down, I think, has been really good. Won a really close match against Yawgmoth by just like turn 2 Dress Downing, untap, dropping Kroxa. Won that match against Prowess the same way. Kind of how it used to be with Dress Down and Kroxa in the main deck. But I've been kind of disappointed whenever I main decked Dress Down. I just felt like I wasn't seeing enough opportunities for it or seeing Dress Down when I wanted it. So instead, I kind of opting for like, let me not use that slot in the main deck. And instead, when I want a sideboard in Dress Down, just like overload on Dress Downs. Kaito's been very solid. Definitely better in like the 4-color matchups, mURktide, stuff like that. But when you do hit it, it's been, at least for me, really, really good. Could just cut down to 1 because you really don't want to see it early. But I've been wanting to test out the idea of like having turn 1 Ragavan hit turn 2 Kaito. But I have not had it come up yet. Mainly because all the matches that you want to do that against, they've got like pretty good answers to Ragavan. Hearse has been really, really good recently. The Terminates have been spectacular. EE is like a necessary evil, I think. It's good, but it's not like game ending most of the time. It's just like a reasonable value wipe out of the board. But otherwise, that's all we got. I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, if you have any questions, comments, leave them down below. If you just want to say like, oh, Michael, your plays are terrible, why on earth do you have a YouTube channel? Then you can also leave that down below and we'll take note of it. But otherwise, hope everybody has a fantastic rest of your day. Enjoy some good food and company. Catch y'all back live on stream at twitch.tv/the_control freak. Yeah, control freak link down below. So check that out and hope to catch you in a live stream. Adios for now.